And our final question comes from Sang Lim for the top 10 questions tonight. And he said, how would you simply walk into Mordor, Bill? And my answer is I would do it rather charmingly. I think it'd be my answer. I think I do it with a certain amount of charm and swagger. Not swagger, just charm. Just like, how you doing? How's everybody going? Orcs out there? Yeah. So listen, you know, it doesn't have to be this bad, man. You can live better than this, you poor little orcs. I don't know how you walk into Mordor, except to saying that you do, right? You just do. You have to. Maybe you sneak into Mordor. Maybe you sprint into Mordor. Maybe you hike into Mordor. Maybe you march into Mordor. Maybe you fly into Mordor. Maybe you tunnel into Mordor. But I know the question was kind of a joke, but the serious answer is you've got to be prepared to walk into Mordor. And if you're not, then bad things happen to you and everybody else. Was doing a Q&A up there at Mountain View a couple days ago, and somebody asked me about this Muslim terrorism thing, and is Islam incompatible with America and all that stuff. I said, well, look, it's not incompatible with America. Most of the people millions, the huge majority of Muslims in America are hardworking people. They're good family people. They have solid values, and they have no desire whatsoever to hurt other people or anything like that. It's an absolute fact. I mean, we got to start there. And look, there's no but attached to this. There's no reversal to that position. It's the truth. The huge majority of American Muslims are terrific, terrific people. It's not a but, because everything after the but is the truth. So it's not but, it's and. The problem is, I understand the power of fear. Historically, I've never had experience here in this country. I criticize the President of the United States every day. I'm not afraid of him. And the reason I'm not afraid of him is because of all the men and women who've gone and died for me out in foreign soil for 250 years to keep me free. The freedom's in my blood and my bones. I'm not afraid of the President of the United States. I'm not afraid of anything that's going to happen to me because I speak about the President of the United States. And that freedom from fear is a debt that I owe to the veterans of this country, both living and dead. With that said, I understand why so many domestic Muslims are scared. They're scared because the same reason other people are scared. But this is the point that does need to be said. When Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, the anti-Japanese sentiment in this country was so strong that we interred American citizens who had no business being interred. It was a Democrat that did that. And what happened was, after Pearl Harbor, huge numbers of Japanese Americans enlisted in the armed forces, and they had to send them to Europe because they were afraid if they sent them to the Pacific, not only would some of them be killed by accident, some of them might be murdered by mostly Marines who were so hot at the treachery and the barbarism of the actual Japanese. But after Pearl Harbor, huge numbers of Japanese Americans enlisted and served with unbelievable courage. The personal level of commendation and the unit citations for Japanese American units serving in Europe is off the hook. And the reason is because they had something to prove, and what they had to prove is they had to prove that they were Americans first and Japanese second. And that won them certainly my respect, and I think many people's respect. And I'm not seeing that today among American Muslims. And there will be consequences to this. And the consequences are as follows. I understand if you're a Muslim in America and you're terrified about speaking out against these animals and barbaric murderers and torturers and terrorists and all the rest of it. I understand what they do to apostates. I understand what they do to I understand the fear, and I understand that well, I would say. However, what you need to understand is this. There is a price to be paid for you being silent. And the price that you will pay for being silent is the same price that the German people paid for being silent, because the huge majority of the German people weren't Nazis either. But they went along with the Nazis. They didn't go along with the Nazis because they particularly agreed with the Nazis. They went along with the Nazis because they were afraid of the Gestapo. They went along with the Nazis because they were afraid of the SA and the SS. They were afraid of the brown shirts. They were afraid of the ruffians. They were afraid of the thugs, so they didn't say anything. And most Germans did not know about the death camps, but most Germans at the same time certainly did know that neighbors of theirs were being removed forcibly at night and taking places that they didn't care to ask questions about. So, when you are silent, you become complicit. And the more silent you remain, the more the fear grows. And the more the fear grows, the more silent people become. And the next thing you know, things get very, 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 very bad. The German people paid an enormous price for their silence. People who were never Nazis, who were not concentration camp guards, and people who may even have despised the Nazis, had their houses bombed to rubble around them, and their sons and fathers and husbands and daughters and sons and fathers and killed, and their daughters and wives and mothers raped by the Russians. They did it because they paid the price because they were silent, and the whole German culture paid that price. And likewise, the Japanese culture paid the price for the militants in the Japanese Imperial High Command. So I would simply say this: your silence is not only disgraceful; it's understandable, but it's disgraceful. But it will bring about the kind of response that nobody wants to see. I've said for the longest time that America has not been fully angry, since 1945. It's the last time America was fully angry. There was some stand-up comedian, I forget who he was, I think it was an East Indian guy, I don't remember for sure, but it was some stand-up comedian, foreign-born stand-up comedian, who said, you'll know America's really angry with you because when America's really angry with you, they're not going to drop 10,000 bombs on you, they're going to drop 2 bombs. And, yeah. So, look, if Muslims, and they do, if Muslims have a right to live in this, needless to say, they have a right to live in this country. They don't need my permission to live in this country. And you could be a law-abiding Muslim in this country, but by remaining silent about this, by not standing up the way that the Japanese did after Pearl Harbor, you are becoming complicit in the crimes. Complicit is not the same as sin of omission is not the same as a sin of commission, but the results will be the same. You're silent in the same way that these Germans were silent when they knew that they should be speaking up and didn't, out of fear. And the funny thing about this is that fear, like courage, is a self-reinforcing cycle. The more frightened people are, the more frightened people become, and the more courageous people are, the more courageous they become. And so we simply have to say, it's time to stand up and speak the truth. And that's what the guys at Charlie did, and a bunch of them were killed for it. And they're braver than the New York Times or the LA Times or the Washington Post, which won't do it, which won't put our founding principles above, fear of these people. And it's only because these terrorist savages know that we're afraid that they get away with this. Ultimately, the responsibility comes down to the commander-in-chief. If the commander-in-chief made it crystal clear that the murdering of our civilians or the murdering of any civilians in the name of Islamic terrorism was going to be met with overwhelming, destructive, crushing military force, then this problem would go away, and everybody knows it. But we don't have that kind of moral courage right now. But it's still here, and it's still in the country, and we've got to remember that fear does funny things to people. But Muslim Americans also need to remember that they are either Muslims first or Americans first. The Japanese Americans made that decision. Italian Americans who went to serve in World War II and fight in Italy and kill Italians made that decision. German Americans who shipped overseas in the U.S. Army to kill Germans made that decision. And they made it clearly, and I'm not seeing it here. And the very few times I do see it, those people are absolutely destroyed, not only by the Muslims, but also by the left. They're destroyed. So be aware of consequences. That's all I would say. And that is 10 questions on what I would do if I had all the money and all the power and all the time in the world. If I had all the power in the world, I would immediately divest myself of it before it began to work its way into my brain and start telling me about all the good things I could do if I had all the power in the world.